The Hebrew Bible, 5 books of Moses. Genesis, chapter 29. Jacob lifted his feet and went on to the land of the Easterners. And he saw, and look, there was a well in the field, and look, 3 flocks of sheep were lying beside it. For from that well they would water the flocks, and the stone was big on the mouth of the well. And when all the flocks were gathered there, they would roll the stone from the mouth of the well, and would water the sheep, and put back the stone in its place on the mouth of the well. And Jacob said to them, My brothers, where are you from? And they said, We are from Haran. And he said to them, Do you know Laban, and son of Nahor? And they said, We know him. And he said to them, Is he well? And they said, He is well, and look, Rachel his daughter is coming with the sheep. And he said, Look, the day is still long. It is not time to gather in the herd. Water the sheep, and take them to graze. And they said, We cannot, until all the flocks have gathered, and the stone is rolled from the mouth of the well, and the water the sheep. He was still speaking with them when Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. And it happened, when Jacob saw Rachel, daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, that he stepped forward and rolled the stone from the mouth of the well, and watered the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother. And Jacob kissed Rachel, and lifted his voice, and wept. And Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's kin, and that he was Rebekah's son. And she ran and told her father. And it happened, when Laban heard the report of Jacob his sister's son, he ran toward him, and embraced him, and kissed him, and brought him to his house. And he recounted to Laban all these things. And Laban said to him, Indeed, you are my bone and my flesh. And he stayed with him a month's time. And Laban said to Jacob, Because you are my kin, should you serve me for nothing? Tell me what your wages should be. And Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the elder was Leah, and the name of the younger Rachel. And Leah's eyes were tender, but Rachel was comely in features, and comely to look at. And Jacob loved Rachel. And he said, I will serve 7 years for Rachel, your younger daughter. And Laban said, Better I should give her to you than give her to another man. Stay with me. And Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed in his eyes but a few days in his love for her. And Jacob said to Laban, Give me my wife, for my time is done, and let me come to bed with her. And Laban gathered all the men of the place, and made a feast. And when the evening came, he took Leah his daughter, and brought her to Jacob, and he came to bed with her. And Laban gave Zilpah, his slave girl, to Leah his daughter as a slave girl. And when morning came, look, she was Leah. And he said to Laban, What is this you have done to me? Was it not for Rachel that I served you? And why have you deceived me? And Laban said, It is not done thus in our place to give the younger girl before the firstborn. Finish out the bridal week of this one, and we shall give you the other as well for the service you render me for still another 7 years. And Jacob did. And when he finished out the bridal week of the one, he gave him Rachel his daughter as wife. And Laban gave to Rachel his daughter Bilhah, his slave girl, as her slave girl. And he came to bed with Rachel too, and indeed loved Rachel more than Leah. And he served him still another 7 years. And the Lord saw that Leah was despised, and he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. And Leah conceived and bore a son, and called his name Reuben. For she said, Yes, the Lord has seen my suffering, for now my husband will love me. And she conceived again and bore a son, and she said, Yes, the Lord has heard I was despised, and he has given me this one too. And she called his name Simeon. And she conceived again and bore a son, and she said, This time at last my husband will join me, for I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore, and his name called Levi. And she conceived again and bore a son, and she said, This time I sing, praise the Lord. Therefore she called his name Judah, and she ceased bearing children. Chapter 30. And Rachel saw that she had borne no children to Jacob, and Rachel was jealous of her sister. And she said to Jacob, Give me sons, for if you don't, I'm a dead woman. And Jacob was incensed with Rachel, and he said, Am I instead of God, who has denied you fruit of the womb? And she said, Here's my slave girl, Bilhah. Come to bed with her, that she may give birth on my knees, so that I too shall be built up through her. And she gave him Bilhah, her slave girl, as a wife, and Jacob came to bed with her. And Bilhah conceived and bore Jacob a son. And Rachel said, God granted my cause. Yes, he heard my voice, and he gave me a son. Therefore she called his name Dan. And Bilhah, Rachel's slave girl, conceived again and bore a second son to Jacob. And Rachel said, In fearsome grapplings I have grappled with my sister, and yes, I won out. And she called his name Naphtali. And Leah saw that she had ceased bearing children, and she took Zilpah, her slave girl, and gave her to Jacob as a wife. And Zilpah, Leah's slave girl, bore Jacob a son. And Leah said, Good luck has come. And she called his name Gad. And Zilpah, Leah's slave girl, bore a second son to Jacob. And Leah said, What good fortune! For the girls have acclaimed me fortunate. And she called his name Asher. And Reuben went out during the wheat harvest and found mandrakes in the field and brought them to Leah his mother. And Rachel said to Leah, Give me, pray, some of the mandrakes of your son. And she said, Is it not enough that you have taken my husband, and now you would take the mandrakes of my son? And Rachel said, Then let him lie with you tonight in return for the mandrakes of your son. And Jacob came from the field in the evening, and Leah went out to meet him and said, With me you will come to bed, for I have clearly hired you with the mandrakes of my son. And he lay with her that night, and God heard Leah, and she conceived and bore Jacob a fifth son. And Leah said, God has given my wages, because I gave my slave girl to my husband. And she called his name Issachar. And Leah conceived again and bore a sixth son, Jacob, to Jacob. And Leah said, God has granted me a goodly gift. This time my husband will exalt me, for I have borne him 6 sons. And she called his name Zebulun. And afterward she bore a daughter, and she called her name Dinah. And God remembered Rachel, and God heard her, and he opened her womb, and she conceived and bore a son. And she said, God has taken away my shame. And she called his name Joseph, which is to say, May the Lord add me another son. And it happened when Rachel bore Joseph that Jacob said to Laban, Send me off, that I may go to my place and to my land. Give me my wives and my children, for whom I am served you, that I may go, for you know the service that I have done you. And Laban said to him, If pray, I have found favor in your eyes, I have prospered, and the Lord hath blessed me because of you. And he said, Name me your wages, that I may give them. And he said to him, You know I have served you, and how your livestock has fared with me. For the little you had before my time has swollen to a multitude, and the Lord has blessed you on my account. And now, when I shall too provide for my household. And he said, What shall I give you? And Jacob said, You need give me nothing, if you will do this thing for me. Let me go back and herd your flocks and watch them. I shall pass through all your flocks today to remove from them every spotted and speckled animal, and every dark-colored sheep, and the speckled and spotted among them. Among the goats, that will be my wages. Then my honesty will bear witness for me in the days to come. When you go over my wages, whatever is not spotted and speckled among the goats and dark-colored among the sheep shall be accounted stolen by me. And Laban said, Let it be just as you say. And he removed on that day the spotted and speckled he-goats, and all the brindled and speckled she-goats, every one that had white on it, and every dark-colored among the sheep, and he gave them over to his sons. And he put 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob, while Jacob herded the remaining flocks of Laban. And Jacob took himself moist rods of poplar, and almond and plane tree, and peeled with strips in them, laying bare the white on the rods. And he stood the rods he had peeled in the troughs, in the water channels from which the flocks came to drink, opposite the flocks which went into heat when they came to drink, and the flocks went into heat at the rods, and the flocks bore brindled, spotted, and speckled young, and the sheep Jacob kept apart. He placed them facing the spotted and all the dark-colored and Laban's flocks, and he set himself herds of his own, and he did not set them with Laban's flocks. And so whenever the vigorous of the flocks went into heat, Jacob put the rods in full sight of the flocks, in the troughs, for them to go in heat by the rods. And for the weaklings of the flocks he did not put them. And so the feeble ones went to Laban, and the vigorous ones to Jacob. And the man swelled up mightily, and he had many flocks, and female and male slaves, and camels and donkeys.